Good morning. This is likely to be the first of a few items you're going to hear over the next 12 months on Code for America. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what Code for America is, some of the work that SACOG staff and West Sacramento staff have been doing over the last couple months, and a little bit what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. And then I'm going to turn it over to Director Cabaldon, who's going to have the bulk of this item. Just to set a little bit of context, Code for America and what they do. And I want to say that we've done a few small briefings to a few of the committees on this item, and an item to the Innovation Task Force with a little bit more substance. But this will be the first time the board has heard about this project in any detail. Code for America is a nonprofit based out of San Francisco, and the main charge of Code for America is to find ways through technology and innovation to help governments look at some of the issues that they're faced with and find new and innovative solutions. And they often use technology to do this. And they do this through a few programs, looking at how you work with startups, how you maybe have some peer networks between some of these more innovative cities, and then specifically the one that West Sacramento and SACOG are going to be working on is a fellowship program, which is where they send 3 fellows and embed them within a community for a month to identify an issue and get to know how the community actually works, identify that issue, and then come up with an innovative technological solution to implement that. Specifically, one thing Code for America looks at is how residents engage with government on that particular issue. And so that's really what the technology or the app or the website or whatever they come up with to develop is really looking at, is how do residents engage with government around this very particular issue. Just to give you an idea of the calendar for this, it spans all of calendar year 2015. It actually begins with the fellows going to Code for America in San Francisco, learning a little bit more about the program, hearing what some of the issues are generally that some of the other fellows are going to be faced with before they go to their respective cities to begin the full process and embed themselves there. The work then continues through calendar year 2015 with the idea that in September of 2015 there's a large Code for America Summit where those fellows then present on the solution that they've come up with and show that to everyone else, and then spend the last few months of the calendar year just fine-tuning that and deploying whatever technology they've come up with. Even though this work really begins in January, there's been a lot of work done to date between West Sacramento and SACOG. We've done a lot of starting to coordinate with various stakeholders. We've been working quite a bit with Monica Hernandez and David Shabazian, identifying who those particular stakeholders are. Oh, I'm going to stop right there. The focus for our Code for America Fellowship is in a larger scale health, and more specifically the application that was led by West Sacramento and partnered with SACOG is looking at food systems. And we're going to be using a lot of the knowledge that we've gained through the RUX project over the last 7 or 8 years to really be the driver of this. And that's why we've been working with Monica and David on identifying those stakeholders. We're going to be doing things like mini RUX tours, a lot of stakeholder outreach and meetings over the first few weeks of February so that these fellows have an understanding of how a regional food system actually works, who are the players in this food system, and then start the issue identification process that they're going to then work through the Code for America system to come up with an issue and a solution. Outside of doing a lot of outreach and logistics and setting up meetings, we're looking at what kind of data are available for these fellows to start working with, and how can we make this data open and available for the fellows to actually start to work with. So SACOG has been looking at its own data internally that we feel like might be useful to the Code for America fellows, and just what other data are out there that we can open up, even if it doesn't appear to be related to what maybe a regional food system might look like. Let's get those data and compile them and make them open and available for these fellows to work with. And the idea is that they're going to then continue to work with our local civic tech sector to use those data in a meaningful way to move beyond just an issue identification and solution for a regional food system, but how can these data be used in other ways? So we're working with West Sacramento staff on making our data available on their open data portal, and then we're going to be looking at, over the next 12 months, what would it take to build a regional open data portal, and we're working with your IT managers and CIOs to help identify where those data are available and how do we actually make them open and available for not only the fellows but everyone else to use as well. We're also just kind of working through some of the contracting and administrative details to make sure that the fellows actually have a place to live. I understand there's been a generous offer for them to live in a fantastic place in Ironworks in West Sacramento. And then last but not least, and I'll let Mayor Cabaldon talk a little bit more about this, we've set up a leadership council meeting that's going to kind of be ad hoc, that when issues come up, there'll be more of a sounding board to hear what some of these issues are and help maybe brainstorm what some potential solutions might be for that. And so I'll let Mayor Cabaldon talk a little bit more about that. So unless there's any questions about just generally what Code for America is and what SACOG's role might be, I'm going to turn it over to Director Cabaldon to take the bulk of this.
Are you putting bunk beds in your guest room, Christopher?
Well, I'm moving into the Park Moderns and the bridges, the new construction that we have. So my existing loft and ironworks will be available for the fellows if they all want to live together, real style loft. So, just for some initial context, this is on our agenda is the West Sacramento Code for America project. This is a SACOG region-wide initiative. Code for America is a city-focused entity. It's done a couple of projects with counties and I think one or two with states and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. But its main lane is with cities. And so West Sacramento is the anchor for what is explicitly a regional project. If you're familiar with Code for America's, some of their history, one of their early projects was one in, I think in Boston, where the fire department was having difficulty, has always had difficulty accessing fire hydrants during the snow season when they get snowed over. And the Public Works Department didn't have capacity to monitor every single fire hydrant and then dig it out of the snow every time. What was developed through the Code for America process there were a lot of process evaluation and user design was a simple application that simply allowed citizens to adopt a fire hydrant. And they would mark it on the app that they're Paul Joyner, I'm the one in charge of the fire hydrant at this location, and I will, these days of the week, I will make sure that it's dug out. So it's an opportunity for citizens to sort of co-create value. Not to give input to government, but to say, look, government is not going to be able to fix this. But if all of us chip in a little teeny bit, then we can help solve that problem. There are similar projects like that in Hawaii with typhoon warning systems and other sorts of things. That's an example of the kind of an early Code for America project that was involving citizen co-creation. In another project this last year, they went through the process and realized that they were experiencing a large number of their citizens who were getting arrest warrants issued because they weren't showing up for their court appearances. Court appearances typically for traffic violations, but others as well, but they just weren't showing up. And the issuance of a bench warrant then caused a whole cascade of social ills, right? Because once that happens and you enter the criminal justice system, a lot of stuff starts to go bad, and so the cost to the citizen and to the government at all levels was starting to become enormous. So the Code for America team, after living in these processes, not just talking to stakeholders and getting their opinions, but living in these processes, looking at this from a user perspective, designed a fairly simple text messaging system to alert you, when your court date's coming, but also to give you direct links to prepay tickets and that sort of thing. It's had a dramatic effect in terms of the number of bench warrants that have to get issued. In Long Beach, they did a project this last year that's not citizen-facing at all, where they said, look, the judges don't know what's going on in the jail, and the jail folks don't know what's going on in the streets with their police officers. Can we just bring our data systems together with a dashboard that's visible across all the platforms, so that a judge that's making a tweener decision, okay, do I put Lucas in jail for 2 nights? Do I put him on probation? And they're all roughly equivalent, and I've got some discretion here, knowing that the jail has exactly 2 slots left, and that my calendar as a judge, I've got 16, violent felonies coming up after Lucas's case. If I know that, it doesn't necessarily drive my decision, but it gives me context around how my current decision is going to affect my ability to implement my next one. If the jail's full when I get to the murder charge, and so that one doesn't involve citizen engagement at all. But it was really about how do we simply make government work more efficiently. So these are the kinds of projects that Code for America does in a variety of different lanes. But they don't come in with we're going to do this this is going to be your project, and we don't invite them in to say, we want you to build this one thing, because this is a large effort, takes a year, it's a fairly large amount of resources that are committed to it. We could just buy it if all we were doing, we could hire some local firm to build such an application if we knew what all that was. So a significant part of the effort is to try to infuse this, this specific discipline of innovation into government in our own communities. Around user design in particular, and modern approaches to citizen engagement, and the use of data to drive decisions and to open it up. And so there's a set of these disciplines that our intention is to infect government with, is what's happening to a large degree in the private sector. So that's the Code for America model. Most of the cities across the country that have been in Code for America are quite large. They're all much larger than mine, and they're all much larger than Galt or Ileton or Lincoln or even Roseville. So there's been a major movement in the country around this kind of new urban mechanics, civic tech sector, but it's not all the investments have been made in large cities, and because they've been able to hire teams of programmers and developers and UX designers and the whole thing, which cities of most of our scale, other than Director Ashby, who's not here now, can't afford to do. And so the enduring question that's been circulating in the country for the last couple of years is, well, what about the rest of us? What's the mode that doesn't involve creating a whole civic tech office in our communities? And that's one of the reasons why our regional proposal was accepted. I think we're the smallest city ever in the Code for America Fellowship. But it's because we're the anchor of this regional effort to try to say, okay, what if we either built our application, our solution was regional from the beginning? What if we, instead of building something just for West Sac, we built it for the whole region? Or what if we built something for West Sac, but built it for West Sac in collaboration with the rest of the region? So if Winter said, we're going to use the same thing, it's already been designed to accommodate Winter's data system, right? That rather than building just something for Chicago and calling it a success, building either a region-wide effort from the beginning or something that is scalable over time and that can be replicated and taken up by others in the region. And so that's part of the unique feature of our fellowship that's different from any other one in the country. And it's the reason why we've convened this leadership council that the incoming chair, Director Saylor, and I've convened, that includes Director Rohan in their role both as incoming vice chair and as the head of the innovation task force, and Director Griego, and then Steve Hansen from the Sacramento City Council, and Director Gary Davis from Elk Grove, who have both been very active in the civic tech work in the region, and similarly Mark Johannesson from my city council, as well as Mike McKeever and Marty Tuttle, our city manager, who are jointly responsible for the actual execution of this fellowship, plus Haley Pate from the Code for Sacramento Brigade here locally, because another purpose of this project is to activate and connect the local hacker or civic, this local developer innovation technology community, to link them to government in a more fundamental way. They've been doing lots of hackathons and other projects, but they haven't really gotten our attention, and when they get our attention, we don't know how to interact with them, so we're trying to use this project to build more effective linkages between government and local, essentially volunteer technologists and innovators who want to help strengthen our region and strengthen economic development in that lane as well. So that's the basic project. Rafe's gone over the time frame. One critical element that we discussed at the Leadership Council meeting, our first one, was that earlier this week? It was earlier this week, Monday, is in order for us to achieve that regional frame, whether we're building a region-wide app at the beginning or an app that jurisdictions in the region can pick up if they want to, or augment if they want to. It's really critical that we move on a regional basis on this open data effort that Raef described, which there's been talk about open data for several years in the region, but it's boring to anybody except for the open data people and some of the hackers. But for this project, it's really important for us, for the fellows and for the team, to have some sense, okay, what kind of data does Marysville have that could connect to a regional system that's relevant? If we all put our data, and if it's not possible to get data from anybody on this one topic, then maybe that's not a topic we go and tackle. So what we're encouraging from the Leadership Council and from the Code for America team is for the other jurisdictions in the region to consider, if you would, the adoption of an open data policy. There's a pretty standard set of open data policies across the country that the Sunlight Foundation been promoting, but both the City of Sacramento and the City of West Sacramento have adopted open data policies. We're at various levels of implementation. So the first ask, I guess, is that you would consider asking your council, your manager, CAOs to bring forward an open data policy. The open data policy simply says it's our intention to make data open. It doesn't automatically unlock any sets of data, in particular, and all the issues around, well, how discrete of the data, what's the privacy issues and all of that. There's a lot of work that's been done in that arena, a lot of templates, but opening up that data through a policy is sort of a step one from the governing body. And then at the staff level to actually begin doing that, so to go through the data sets, not just opening them, but thinking about how they can connect in a common framework, in a common dictionary, in a common language with the rest of the region. Right? So if we open up our housing data and Live Oak opens up their housing data, but all the definitions are even slightly different, then you can't build a solution based on those systems if the data aren't connecting. And so that's part of the reason why Raef's describing the work of the CIOs to make that happen. But they need the policy leadership of the councils and the Board of Supervisors to say that, well, we want to go in that direction. Here, the open data policies typically have principles around privacy and other concerns, but it's important for the policymaking body to just kind of lay that out at the beginning. We don't expect, obviously, by February when the fellows arrive that we would have all the data opened up and all cleaned up and in a common portal, single portal. That's probably even for our city, that's a little unrealistic. But what will be important is to have some sense about which jurisdictions and which kinds of data are on the way to being opened up, so that as the application's getting prototyped, we know whether there's going to be a possible solution at the end, whether the data will at some point in the relatively near future be available in order to make it work. So I think we're asking the regional managers also to take a look at this next month at their meeting from Leadership Council as well. But we'll take somewhat of a half-court press in order to keep it on a schedule that will help us realize the regional scale of the potential solutions that might get addressed. One last thing, we're using the Leadership Council to help guide the process of identifying the specific focus area and the solution in conjunction with the fellowship team and all the research that they're doing. And we did some sort of random ideation at our meeting earlier in the week. We're not going to be giving the fellows, here's your thing, here's your project, but through the Leadership Council, through Raef and Mike, if you've got ideas around problem areas or cool ideas that you've heard about elsewhere that are kind of in the food system, health lane, we'd love to hear about them, incorporate them into or people or processes that the fellows might look at or embed themselves in. Also would be really helpful, because we're doing that in West Sacramento, but we want to make sure that they get some non-West Sacramento experience so that they can understand what region means, and not the region is not just West Sacramento times 20. That there's different places and different contexts that they ought to be attending to. So that's the overview of the project. We're really excited about it. I should say one other thing. The James R. Ryan Foundation is a major supporter of this project. Typically, the host city goes out and raises a couple $100,000 in order to make this work, and SACOG and the city have both allocated budget funds through our budget processes in order to make that work. But most of the funding for this project is coming from the James Irvine Foundation because of their interest in both health and in civic engagement and the connection to the food system. So, very close to that.
Great, thank you very much.